to discuss the incident that occurred in the early morning hours of June 5th at 60th and Center Streets in Omaha, dealing with the interaction of Zachary Bare Heels with the members of the Omaha Police Department. And I just want to let you know, too, first of all, that I'm going to allow, while we're here, the viewing of portions of relevant video provided by the Omaha Police Department regarding this incident. And at this time, I don't intend to give out any copies of this video. This is not the only video or audio that applies to this case. There are several different cruiser cameras involved and some audio. However, I think the video that you'll see is the most pertinent or relevant to what we're going to talk about this morning. But I wanted to let you know I'm not going to be able to give you copies of this once we play it. Police officers are placed in very difficult situations in the job they do to keep the peace and provide a safe environment for the citizens of our community. It's a daunting task in today's society. However, while they're in that position, they are capable of making serious mistakes in their encounters with citizens. Our laws and law enforcement should protect those that are most vulnerable, particularly those that suffer from mental illness. In this encounter, in the early morning hours of June 5th, Zachary Bare Heels had committed no crime. He was simply a human being suffering from a severe mental illness that was quite obvious to anyone who was in contact with him. The issue that presents itself in this case is whether the officer's use of force in this circumstance was justified or was it a crime. Zachary Bare Heels, as you will see on the video, was handcuffed, dragged by his hair, shocked with an electronic device, and punched repeatedly. After medics were called to the scene, he passed away. Our deepest sympathy goes to the Bare Heels family. An autopsy was performed by Dr. Michelle Eliff, who's a board-certified forensic pathologist. And the toxicology report that she received from that autopsy showed that there were no controlled substance in his system. The cause of death was attributed to excited delirium. The doctor stated that the specific actions of the officers are not, by themselves, a proximate cause of Zachary Bare Heels' death. Because of the nature of what took place in those early morning hours, there is understandably a great amount of emotion involved with all the parties and the public. That being said, our responsibility is to determine from the facts and the evidence if a crime has been committed and the law has been violated. Our responsibility in that area is only with regard to the criminal, not civil responsibility. The law provides that in cases involving the death of an individual in custody or attempting to be apprehended by law enforcement, there shall be a grand jury. The law also provides that the county attorney shall charge and prosecute crimes that occur in that county attorney's jurisdiction. I don't take that responsibility lightly and have reviewed the evidence in this case and will file criminal charges prior to a grand jury being called. Based on the evidence, the facts, and the law in this case, we are charging Scotty Payne with second-degree assault, which is intentionally or knowingly causing bodily injury to another person with a dangerous instrument, in this case, what's commonly referred to as a taser. That's a felony and carries up to 20 years in prison. We are charging Ryan McClarty with third-degree assault, which is intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly causing bodily injury to another person. That's a Class 1 misdemeanor and carries up to 1 year in prison and or a $1,000 fine. In an effort to be as transparent as I possibly can about this case, our office, we will now view relevant portions of the video provided by the Omaha Police Department cruiser cams at that location, 60th and Center, that evening. All right, and I'll just explain who's in the video for you when we get to that point. But the first portion you're going to see is the initial encounter that officers had. It's about 12:40 a.m. on June 5th, 2017 at 60th and Center Streets. The parties you'll see, go ahead, Diane, a little bit here. Zachary Bearhills is the individual in shorts, standing there by Buttons. You'll see him approached by Officer Strudel and Officer Mosby.
How'd you get here? Okay, so are you just living on the streets or what? Do you use meth tonight? Do you use meth tonight? You don't have to whisper. You don't have anything? Do you have an ID? Nope. We don't want to take you to jail. We just want you to cooperate and tell us what's going on. Why are you whispering? Yeah.
So he's handcuffed. We're going to fast forward. There's some time period that takes place where the police, there's contact with Zachary Bearhill's mother on the phone. They find out he's a missing person. They find out about the bus depot. There's talk about him going back to the bus depot. They try and have mom talk to Mr. Bearhills on the phone. He doesn't really seem to understand what's going on. He's sitting in the back of the cruiser. So that takes some period of time. And then we'll just fast forward it to he's in the back of the cruiser. They're going to take him, transport him to the bus station. And the officer comes in to put a seatbelt on him, and that's when he leaves the cruiser. So that's the next part. And this occurs 1:29 a.m.
We gotta put your seatbelt on. No, stand up on.
So he exits the cruiser, and this cruiser is Officer Strudel's cruiser, and the doors open on that right passenger side, the rear door, and there's a camera view back from that. So you'll see, we'll pick up that view. They go out of the photograph. There's a scuffle, and there's some. They're trying to get him back to the car, and then you'll see. The next thing you're going to see is Officer McClarty has Zachary Bearhills by his hair and I think his belt, and is dragging him back to the cruiser with the female officer there, and Scotty Payne also there. And then you won't be able to see it. Scotty Payne has the taser device. He deploys the taser 12 times from 1:28 to 1:43 a.m. and you'll see what takes place. They bring him over back to the cruiser. He's placed sitting against the rear tire of the cruiser, and then I think the video speaks for itself.
Here, I'm gonna go on there.
Get up.
Here we go. Here we go.
Come on, why can't you just get in the car?
Come on, man.
Let it go. Let it go. Stay in the middle.
You gonna do it again? You gonna relax? Get up, dude.
He's just probably on the northwest corner of Saul. Still running nice. We're back eastbound. You got Raiders northbound. White t-shirt, blue jeans.
Are you gonna get in the car? No?
Turn back here now.
Put on it now.
Good. Love it.
You don't have anything next to it. Get it back away.
I don't have
Yeah. Oh, okay. I don't know.
Get up, dude.
Get
Get up.
Can we get you don't have to get in the car first?
Hey, look, get up. Get up. You don't want to get real. Get up.
So the taser wires you can see are attached. After the last tasing in that circumstance, he slips a cuff, and that's when Officer McClarty then gets involved in this portion of it and begins to use strikes. And that's Officer McClarty.
We also did another unit for this. We have a very bad Where's he at? We're on 16th and Cinnamon.
Before he wants to start
Yes, that's where that might happen. No help. Just have a
Arvin, you.
all units along the pursuit switch to southeast Calvary Creek. Any unit in the pursuit switch radio to southeast Calvary Creek, southwest of
Yeah. Yeah.
81, you can take off for 10 bucks.
Come on, man.
All right, the next thing that happens then is a he's not breathing. He's transported and pronounced dead. So that's where things are at. Mr. Payne will turn himself in, I believe, Friday morning to be booked on this and have a bond setting on Friday afternoon. Mr. McClarty will receive a citation for third-degree assault, and then we'll proceed from there. Any questions?
Can you explain how you arrived at these exact charges for these officers? Why felony assault? Why not second-degree murder, first-degree murder?
Well, there's no evidence whatsoever that these officers intentionally killed Zachary Bearheels. And also we looked at that, and that's why I made the autopsy findings public when they came back. As I said before, the doctor would say that she cannot say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that there's a proximate cause between what the officers did and his cause of death, which was excited delirium. So that being the case, again, based on the evidence and the facts, we wanted to, if the question was then, was excessive force used, or were they justified in doing what they did as far as deploying the taser or the strikes? And we believe the evidence shows no.
Not even manslaughter here didn't cross your mind?
Well, manslaughter, again, certainly we looked at all the laws. I mean, that's our job. But you have to have a proximate cause for the action with regard to the death of the individual. And the doctor says, I can't say that. That he could have died from this excited delirium without any one of these factors as far as the strikes, the use of the taser. And there's nothing that she can point to, as I said, with regard to the blows that you observed. There's no brain bleed, there's no swelling of the brain, there's no contusions of the brain. There's some abrasions to his face. Obviously he was hit, but there's not a significant injury that comes from that.
So it was the position of the coroner and your office that Zachary Bearheels could have spontaneously died on his own?
Oh, no.
Had he not been...
No, that's not, I'm not going to argue about this at this point in time, but certainly that's something we had a question about.
And the penalty's the same.
Right, and the penalty with regard to manslaughter is the same as second-degree assault. But we don't have causation from a medical perspective, and we have a board-certified forensic pathologist who said that causation's not there. Certainly, when you look at it, that's a question that comes to mind. It comes to our mind also, with regard to that being, there's a linkage between his death and the officer's actions. But it's about this state of excited delirium that he was in, and we can't pinpoint any one of those factors to be a cause of death. That's my understanding from the doctor. I'm not a doctor, so.
John, is this the first time Omaha police officers have been charged for while on duty?
Is this the first time?
Yeah.
No, it's not. If I remember right, Jim Jansen, when he was county attorney, charged an officer Cruz in the death of an individual. It never resulted in a trial or anything, but at least I think there was a charge filed at one time.
And we've had sexual assaults.
Right, we've had other officers certainly that we filed, unfortunately had to file cases on with regard to sexual assault or maybe a theft case, something like that. But this is obviously with this kind of case, a death that occurred and the interaction between the police. This is the first time that we have in this type of situation. We filed other cases, the 33rd and Seward, with regard to officers. We had some charges filed in that case. There were charges filed also with regard to, I believe it was civilian employees of the jail when somebody died back in the jail when it was in the Omaha Police Department facility. So it's not the first time ever, but in this situation it is.
Have Payne and McClarty been interviewed in this case by investigators?
I really can't go into details about the investigation or what they said in the course of an interview.
I'm not asking that. Have
Sure.
you been interviewed?
Oh, certainly. There have been attempts to interview them.
There have been attempts, but they've not.
Well, like I said, I'm not going to go into details as to what they said or if they were interviewed, but there were certainly attempts to interview.
Why did you feel it was important to release the video in this case?
Well, I believe in as much as we can transparency so that the public is aware of what took place there. and what's the basis for decision-making that we have. And like I said, there's a lot of emotions involved in this case. And I think it's important for people to deal with facts and evidence, and that's part of the evidence in the case. And I think the public has a right to know. And there's a balancing process there.
You said you wanted to release this video, but we didn't see all of it. Why release just these portions?
Well, I mean, we could stand here and we could play probably an hour and a half video, but it really doesn't show anything. And I'm not going to sit here and do that. And I think I have to balance, from Marsh's perspective, we have people charged with the crime now. That's going to be evidence in the case. And so, but I think it's important that at least those are the relevant portions that we saw.
And who decided if these were the most relevant portions, you or OPD?
I did.
You did.
Yeah, we've viewed all the video in this case. We've seen all the video. We have a huge stack of reports, investigative reports in this case. We've talked to experts in different fields with regard to what happened here, and so that's where we're at.
And
Will the Bear Hills
these
fam-
portions are relevant to the basis of the decisions that we made.
Will the
Right.
Bear Hills family be able to see the entire video?
Yeah, I'd like to talk to them. I talked to Mr. Lemaire a while back. He was going to have them contact me. I haven't heard from that. I hope that I will, and I'll be happy to sit down and visit with them. I've had true contacts with a person that said they were a family spokesperson and visited with them on the phone about what was going on, but I would like to visit with the family myself.
Now that these guys are charged, how does the grand jury situation play out?
Well, what'll happen is there's a grand jury set for September 26th. I didn't feel it was appropriate for, based on what I knew happened here, to wait for that grand jury. I think that it's somewhat moot. The grand jury doesn't have to make a decision here, so that's what I see.
Will they still be convened? Or?
Well, there'll be a grand jury convened because there's other cases, but whether they would be presented this case, we'll have to make a decision about that.
Don, what strikes you most about the video?
Well, again, I don't want to comment too much about a pending case where we have a case charge, but I think the video, to some extent, speaks for itself. I mean, it's as I said, this is an encounter with an individual who had committed no crimes. He's suffering, obviously, from a mental illness, and unfortunately, we see what happened.
Because of the Douglas County Attorney's very close and long relationship with the Omaha Police, don't you think it would be appropriate to ask the Nebraska Attorney General to investigate this case of Zachary Bearhill's death and for him to prosecute if they deem that it's appropriate?
No. Do you want to know why?
Yes.
It's my job. And, the Attorney General deals with law enforcement also. So there's not really that much of a separation there. I think that it's my responsibility here to handle the cases that occur here in Douglas County. And people might question sometimes about if there's some issue with regard to being fair or impartial. And, I take this job very seriously. And I think we've done a substantial review of the evidence in this case. And I think that our office would be fine in handling this. I don't think there's an issue.
There was an outside investigation.
Yeah, there's an outside investigation. I've also been contacted by the Department of Justice about this. I mean, and we'll see what happens there.
Who did the outside investigation?
Well, there were Douglas County Sheriff's Office were involved in it.
Question.
Sure.
I was
Well, I'm not
wondering,
going to answer questions just from the public. Okay. I'll be happy.
the two lady cops questioned? Was the
Sure,
two
all
ladies-
the officers were interviewed. Okay.
Are they being considered as accomplices? Why did they say something?
You mean as far as what took place during the
Yeah.
incident? I'm not going to go into the details of what they said or what they did at this point in time.
So they're gonna
They haven't been
get away
charged.
scot-free, in other words.
Don, at the time, did the officers know that Mr. Bearhill was mentally ill?
Well, I think at some point in time, I think they realized that because there was contact made with Zachary Bearhill's mother. And they realized he was a missing person. They realized what had happened. He was on a bus from South Dakota to Oklahoma, got off the bus, or was taken off the bus in Omaha, and then it was found, wandering. First of all, Saturday afternoon, and then on the early morning hours of June 5th, he was at 60th and Center there also.
You said Payne's bond will be set on Friday. What do you think a fair bond is for charges like this?
I guess that's up to the judge. The judge will make that determination. I don't see him as any sort of flight risk. I'm sure he'll show up to court, which is the purpose of the bond when he's supposed to. So that's up to the judge.
And you said the Department of Justice has contacted you. What sort of conversation did you have with DOJ? What are they concerned about? What did
I'm not going to go into any detail, but certainly they always monitor what's going on locally. So they will, and that's what they've informed me, that they'll monitor, and if they think they need to do something, they will.
Have they asked you for any video, for relevant documents?
I guess I'm not going to go into any details about the conversation, other than I've been contacted by them.
Getting back to the grand jury question, I think the question we have, how does this work? You've brought charges, if the grand jury also decides that charges, these guys can't be charged twice for the same crime.
Right.
What happens?
There certainly is, you know, in the law provides that there's dual jurisdiction in many circumstances. I think the question was asked here about, well, could the AG prosecute this, which they could. So they could prosecute it, or we could prosecute it. A grand jury can make a decision in this case. We can make a decision. One of the proponents of the grand jury bill, Senator Chambers, has said publicly that, you know, if the county attorney makes that decision, then it's pretty much moot from the standpoint of a grand jury. That's the whole purpose, is to see if their charges should be filed.
And so is that what happens then if the grand jury, which is set to convene, decides that Payne and McClarty should be charged, then that's dropped in favor of the charges you've brought?
Well, they've been charged. So we're just going to proceed with those charges. That's what I mean. It's somewhat moot from a grand jury's perspective.
So why have the grand jury look into it?
Well, there's a grand jury set for, I'm just saying there's a grand jury. We certified this because we're supposed to do that. And then there was several other cases. But now we've made that determination that there's been charges that we're going to file. So that takes it somewhat out of the hands of the grand jury.
Don, do you know if the Omaha police have a procedure for dealing with mentally ill suspects?
Yeah, there's training involved, and I'm very confident the Chief Schmatter has addressed this issue, the circumstances of this case, and I'm confident in the Omaha Police Department they're going to do everything they can to ensure, from a training aspect. I mean, this is a good example maybe to use in training of what can happen, and I'm confident that they'll address this issue. And you've heard the chief already address this, so I'm confident they will.
Do you know who's representing the two officers charged?
Yes. Yeah, Matt Sadoff and Steve Leffler are representing Scotty Payne, and Joe Nats is representing McClarty.
Tom, can you kind of explain that with the video? Seemingly, you said that he was tased 7 times in the video, but seemingly, I mean, we just hear taser noises the entire time.
Yeah, but I don't think you're hearing taser noises. I don't think you should confuse maybe some of the things that you hear with the taser noise. We have the record as far as the deployment from 128 to 143. The taser was deployed 12 times. Most of them for periods of 5 seconds or 2 seconds, 1 for 18 seconds, and that means it's triggered during that time period.
Mr. Klein, you stated that the police officers had contacted the mother about Mr. Berryfield and said that he had mental illness. Well, why did they tase him that many times? That's what I want to know. If they already knew what was wrong with this young man, why did they tase him that many times?
I can't answer that question for them as to why they did what they did, but I know that there was contact made with Zachary Berryhill's mother during the course of this time period in the parking lot at 60th and Center. And there was even an attempt, like I said, to have Mr. Berryhill speak to his mother on the phone. There's a little part of the video where they're trying to have them talk on the phone. So I'm gonna cut.
If I can, you know my feelings that I have about complicity. And maybe it's for the chief of police to deal with, but I think everybody from the dispatcher on down who let this happen needs to be reprimanded. I think they all need to be fired. And I have questions about the police department. I have questions about the county coroner. Are you going to ask for a second opinion? She's a medical examiner, and I'd sure like to sort out, because I don't understand about this excited delirium. You tasered me 1 time, I'll probably die. 2 times, 3 times, all of us would die. But excited delirium, I don't understand that. I hope that you will maybe get other opinions. The
Yeah.
other thing I want to share with you, I have strong feelings about this complicity. Other people were on the scene, and I think they all need to be dealt with, and I'll continue to say that. Do your job, and you'll do the best you can, but that's the way the community, not just the native community, but Omaha community has those kind of questions. They might not raise them, but that's the questions they have. All these people involved, and we're going to go after 2 of them?
I respect your opinion and your questions, Mr. Lemaire, and like I said, we'll certainly look into it. I know the chief is also.
I also have something to say. I'm a member of the community here.
Well,
in
this
Omaha.
is
Just
not
a
the
member
time.
of the Omaha tribe.
You can say something when you have the opportunity when we get done.
I would
But
just like
do you
to
wanna-
speak just real quick,
Any
Mr.
further
Klein.
questions?
Please allow me to. So, I represent a lot of Native Americans in this community. I have a son who has mental illness. I fear for his life every day because he doesn't have the agoraphobia. He goes out there, and is he a victim? Is he our next? Is he my next victim? Are the police going to shoot him because he's talking to himself? Because he doesn't know who I am or know who you are? The son that walks these streets of Omaha, and I'm going to tell you the state of Nebraska has done nothing for his mental health. I've had doors, phones shut, phones hung up on me. They're still trying to help my son. And I hope to God that someone comes and steps forward to help him. My sister has the same situation. We have to worry about our sons out here in the community walking to and from the store, to the bus station, to GA. I'm hurt by what has happened in our community. It is tearing me up. And I communicate with Zach's mother on a daily. And I know how she feels. And to see my relative be pulled by his hair, that is so inhumane. We are people too. We have feelings. We bleed the same color as all of you. I have black nephews. My father was a white man. I love everyone. And I want this community to learn from this. This cannot continue to go on. And I will be here. And you will see me, because I am going to be that voice for my people, for everyone with mental health issues, white, black, yellow, green, blue, I don't care. In this state of Nebraska, and you all know this, that our mental health sucks. That's all I have to say. You guys have a wonderful day. Pilamaya.
Any other questions from any of the media? One of the things that all of this talk brings about is the issue of mental illness, and that's really what this case shines a light on. The aspect of individuals that have mental health issues, mental illness, and I suppose the resources that we give them or allow them to have, or families to have, and then also the interaction or treatment when they come into contact with law enforcement. So, thank you.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you think that this shows that perhaps there is a problem with the mental health of some of our officers.
Yes.
Do I think there's a problem with the mental health of some of our officers? I don't.
Why would a man taser someone 12 times unless they have some sort of a mental health problem?
I can't answer that question for you, and like I said, I know that the police officers have a very difficult job that they do, and like I said, trying to keep the peace and in their interactions with individuals. And I think as Chief Schmatter has previously said, it's a training issue. He'll address that. We need to make sure that officers, when they come into contact with people that are suffering from a mental health issue or illness, that they know how to handle that situation, and they know how to best handle it, so that we don't have issues or problems. So, thank you.
Real quick, I got something to say. Tonight there's a Native Lives Matter roundtable talk at UNO. It meets at 7, at 6 o'clock on the second floor.
Thank you.